Hello, everybody. It's November 21st, 2024, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developer Meeting. We get together every week to talk about development priorities for Backdrop CMS. It's been an exciting week with both Backdrop Live having happened a week ago today, and also the security release of Backdrop 129.2 that just came out yesterday. So lots of activity and lots of things happening. And we're going to go around and also talk about 1.30 a little bit today and what's coming down the pipeline. To get started, we'll do some introductions. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the Internet. I'm core committer and technical lead for the Backdrop project. We've got a handful of folks with us here today, and I'll go around the room and ask each one to introduce themselves. We'll start with Luke, and then we'll go to Justin.
I'm Luke McCormick. I'm a Drupal backdrop consultant and trainer in don't live anymore. Martinez, California, near San Francisco. I can be found at SellEar on the various platforms.
Thanks, Luke. Justin, and then Laren.
Justin Kaiser in Muncie, Indiana. I'm Kaiser JB on the internets, and that's enough for today.
Thanks, Justin. Laren, and then Olaf.
Hi, I'm Laren, living in Memphis, Tennessee, and work with Atten Design Group and am a core committer.
Thanks, Laren. Yes, you are. Olaf, and then Eli.
Yeah, here's Olaf Krabienski. Can't share my camera at the moment. I'm from Hamburg in Germany, and yeah, nice to be here.
Thanks, Olaf. Eli, and then finally Martin.
Hi, my name is Eli Lissick. I'm a developer with Giant Rabbit, and I'm in San Diego, California.
Hello, I'm Martin Price. I'm a developer for System Horizons in Northeast England, and I'm a backdrop contrib and occasional core contributor.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. That does it for our group today. To kick things off, we usually talk about contrib projects. It's been 2 weeks since we last had a dev meeting because Backdrop Live was during last week's dev meeting. So we've got 2 weeks of contrib projects, including new projects, utility CSS, simple news roles, SSO module. There was quite a bit of discussion about that in Zulip this week. Domain access module looks like it finally got a release. So that's great. That's the central module around the domain module suite. So fantastic to see the initial release of that module being created. Config direct save. That was Justin's 2-hour turnaround module that Irina requested, and UberCart field attributes. So yeah, fun collection of new modules. Yeah, domain access being a huge module and great feature module to be adding to our stable of contrib meta projects. And Justin also puts a note in the chat here. OpenAI is real close, which he also talked about during Backdrop Live. So that's great. Yeah, so contrib world looking great. We also had a security release just yesterday. Backdrop 129.2 just came out yesterday. That also came along with, per our policy, a new release of Backdrop 128. So we always support the latest 2 releases of Backdrop. So if you're still on Backdrop 128, first of all, I don't think there's any real concern about updating to 129, but there is the 128.5, I think, release available for people that like to be a little bit more cautious about their upgrading policy. Yeah, let's talk about the security release a little bit. We did kind of recap just a little bit before the phone call, but I think it would be interesting just to let people know what this thing is. Desktop capture. All right, so first of all, on our security page, over here in the sidebar, you have our list of vulnerabilities, and this one this cross-site scripting one was actually a SVG issue. This one was unique to Backdrop. This was great. We don't get a whole lot of these, like maybe 1 in 4 of our security vulnerabilities are reported directly to us and not coming in through Drupal. And this one, the original reporter coordinated and worked with us, and it was specifically a Backdrop related issue. So I just to do around with our SVG handling. But I want to talk about this one where we coordinated with Drupal. And let's look at Drupal.org security. So if people are subscribed to both Drupal security issues and Backdrop security issues, you probably noticed that yesterday was a crazy heady day for Drupal security releases. The main reason for that is driven by the Drupal 7 end of life. Drupal 7 end of life is January 5th, and the core release cycle release windows for security updates for Drupal are the 3rd Wednesday of every month. Well, the 3rd Wednesday of every month next month is right in the middle, or right at the start of the Christmas holidays. And so practically speaking, this was basically the last security window for Drupal core for Drupal 7. And so there was a push to get out a bunch of issues that have been delayed. But yeah, like looking at both Backdrop and Drupal, Backdrop shared one of these core vulnerabilities with Drupal, but you can see that Drupal had 3 separate issues. I think there might have actually been a 4th one that was in this category called gadget chain. And this is not a category that I was familiar with prior to this. And honestly, I think calling it gadget chain is somewhat confusing because gadget chain, where that comes from, is it comes from this project that is called PHP generic gadget chains. And so that's where the term gadget chain is coming from this library that is set up to assemble a collection of different approaches to compress them all together to make it so that you can exploit a particular issue. And the real issue at hand here is the use of the unserialize function. And so this is public. It's been out here for a long time. And it contains various mechanisms to attack particular systems, including CodeIgniter, Drupal 7, Guzzle, Laravel, Magento, Monolog. Yeah, like a whole list of different projects that this library contains various ways of attacking these systems. The thing about all of them, though, is that it's dependent upon calling unserialize on an object that contains magic methods like destruct, toString, offset get. Actually, offset get is a part of array iterator capabilities. And the short of it is that you can take an unserialized, you can take a string of serialized data, and then when it gets passed through the unserialize function, you can craft a string in the serialized data that causes the unserialized function to then call arbitrary code inside of the object. And this project has been around for a long time. You can see 5 years ago. And so all of these security releases, they're not vulnerabilities that are directly exploitable. They're all theoretical exploits that if you were able to create a serialized string and get it into Drupal or Backdrop somehow, when it gets passed through unserialized, then it would become a problem. For all of them, there's no known way to get that dangerous hacked string like into the system. But if there were, then you could exploit it. And so all of these are hardenings around making it so that that's not possible. Even if you do get a dangerous string in there, it'll bail out early. But as I was chatting with people before the phone call started, I hate magic methods like the toString, that treating objects like arrays, like DBTNGs. My biggest headache with all of it is the fact that the result object is an object, but then you iterate over it like an array. You know, you do a for each over the results. Any of that stuff where an object acts like something else, acts like a string, acts like an array, that was just driving me so crazy because they're so hard to document and find out like how to interact with them because they don't have explicitly named methods. They're just like, oh, you just cast it to a string and something magic happens. Them just being confusing was enough reason already, but now it being an attack vector for getting passed through serialized and unserialized makes me just even more like, no, never. And that's the reason why we had one security announcement and Drupal had 3, is because there's more prolific use of these kinds of objects in Drupal, just because it's a more object-oriented system. But the temptation of magic methods is sometimes a little strong, where it's a way to achieve backwards compatibility by making an object, something that used to be a string, into now it's an object because it still operates the same otherwise. But yeah, something we may want to avoid. Let's see. So yeah, that's a summary on those gadget chain issues. Yeah, really not a fan. So we had some requests to talk about particular topics for today. We'll talk about those real quick. So just before this meeting, Martin, I'm going to call on you if you would please help elaborate on this issue. I'm going to share my screen again, but just before the meeting, we had somebody report on an issue with hosting. This is issue 6759. And Martin, could you recap this issue?
Yeah, we've had a couple of issues over the last few months, and who knows, there may be more on. But people who are using particular host, Civi hosting, which from the reports, it's a shared hosting provider, but they do have their own kind of config panel. So they're not using like this cPanel, which is why we don't normally see it on most hosts which use cPanel. And basically the ownership of the home directory is with root, which you might expect, but then the ownership of the subdirectories, the top level is root, but the group that the web user is part of, it has write permissions to it. So we've got this scenario where the web user can do it, but because Backdrop, when it does the updates, is doing a check for, well, is the parent path owned by the same user, rather than can the web user write to it? The update's failing, it's then asking them about FTP. So it's not a good user experience. And when in actual fact, it's probably, I think the checks probably doing it too high. So this ADUN guy has put a pull request in. So which is quite a pleasant surprise. We don't often get that for people asking for support, but obviously he knows what he's doing, and he or she knows what they're doing, and have put in a pull request. So you're muted, Nate.
Yeah, you summed it up pretty well here. That just checking if the file owner is the same isn't the same. And actually, this is even more stupid, in that it's checking if the ownership of the config path is the same as the project path. So the config path is like where your settings.php file is. And that's kind of a stupid check. Like, why is that particular path considered to be special? Yeah, that's definitely not good. So yeah, we have a more comprehensive thing that just to check to see if I think it actually does like a real check, but it does a much better job at determining if write access is allowed. Yeah, this looks great. And it's inside of installer manager already. So yeah. Yeah, this is great. Yeah, like you say, Martin, there's been a couple of issues recently where people have been asking about authorize.php, that when project installer it doesn't have write access to the web root, then it throws you over to authorize.php, which is a rarely seen part of Backdrop that we inherited from 777 that theoretically allows you to enter in FTP credentials to temporarily write files to an install location. And recent reports have been coming in saying, I get to this screen and either I don't know what to do or it doesn't work. And quite honestly, I think that there's a pretty good chance that it really doesn't work. Like authorize.php is a neglected part of our system, because it really is difficult to understand and is difficult for it to, yeah, it's difficult in a lot of different ways. So yeah, I've got an issue to just straight up remove authorize.php, that we should deprecate it in Backdrop 1.x. It'd be really good to know if anybody could actually get authorize.php doing anything. Like, is it actually working? Because I don't really know. Like, if we could determine that it doesn't work anyway, and it hasn't worked in the entire history of Backdrop or any time in the last several years, that would be even more fuel for saying, like, let's get rid of this thing that just doesn't work. And if we encounter this situation where you don't have write access, throw an error and link to documentation showing how to enable write access rather than throwing you over to authorize.php, which even if it's funny because even if you did have your system locked down and you did it intentionally, sending somebody over to authorize.php is rarely the right solution, because on a lot of hosts, there is no FTP access. Like, sending them over to this thing, assuming that there's a way to use FTP when in many cases there is not, it's not a very good practice. So anyway, that looks great. Yeah, that's 6759. Pull request has been filed and needs review. Let's see. Also, a topic that I threw on here was Alan Mel's contributor that we see pretty frequently has released a new module called SSO. I'm not totally prepared to talk about this topic, but so this SSO module is a new Backdrop specific module. I'm pretty sure it's from scratch, that enables single sign-on across 2 different sites, but it has the prerequisite that the 2 sites are on the same server, and then it uses Backdrop's table prefixes in settings.php to share certain tables, like the users table, the sessions table, user roles, and in this case, even some field tables to share information across multiple sites. So this ability to use table prefixes and share a table between 2 different sites has been around for a very long time. It's pretty well documented how to use this in the world of Drupal 7. It is a bit of a hack, even though it's been proven over a very long period of time to work.
I'm presuming that you'd have to have the same username and password on the 2 databases for it to work, or is that, or does it work around that?
No, yeah, the password has to be the same, and the user ID is the same, because it's literally sharing the same table across 2 sites. I haven't tried using this particular module, but from doing similar things in the past, it doesn't redirect to one site or the other to actually do the sign-in process, because you can sign into literally any site that's sharing these tables. And because the session table is shared, it will sign you into all of the sites. So it doesn't really matter which site you sign into. they all can have separate login forms, but signing into one signs you into all. But yeah, the trick here is that in order for that to work, you have to set the cookie domain. They all need to be not only on the same server, they also all need to be on the same domain, and there are separate subdomains of each other. And the cookie for the session is set for the entire subdomain or all of the subdomains, and then that cookie then pairs with the value in the sessions table, which is also shared. So I appreciate that this module exists. It's a really simple solution to achieve single sign-on with some caveats that your sites all need to be on the same server, they all need to be sharing the same database server, and they all need to be on the same set of domains. Why I'm bringing this up is because we have this problem for backdropcms.org and all of the properties that we have. We have the events site, we have the forum, we have the doc site, we have the main site, probably others. And it drives me nuts that my sign-on between the event site and the main site are not the same thing. So I'd like to have a solution here for single sign-on, and we've kind of just danced around it for a long time. For now, our user accounts are all just separate, and you need to create an account on each one, which also means we need to have this huge reconciliation process at some point where we have to deal with all of the different user IDs across all of our different sites and link them together somehow. But yeah, looking over in the world of Drupal, I noticed not too long ago, I think it was about 4 or 5 months ago, when you log into Drupal now, it redirects you over to a single sign-on. So Drupal single sign-on previously had been powered by Bakery module, which we also have a port of, and that is an option for us. But Bakery module is also a kind of clever collection of hacks that manages cookies. That's why it's called Bakery modules, because it bakes different kinds of cookies. And if you try to read the code, it is crazy hard to understand because it refers to the different cookies as literally flavors. So there's like chocolate chip cookie and peanut butter cookie, and it's just like, what the heck is going on here with this code base? But it does work. It's like just yet another thing where it's like, there's different approaches to single sign-on, and these ones like Bakery and SSO module are leveraging a set of limitations to make certain things possible. But in my opinion, like single sign-on has been solved. Like there's a standardized way of handling single sign-on now. Almost every major vendor has single sign-on solutions, and that we should be using one of these single sign-on solutions. And this one that Drupal settled on is interesting. Cloud IAM is a hosted service provider that uses Keycloak, and Keycloak is an open source identity provider suite. I can't remember what it's written in. It might be Java. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't pursued it, is because it's like outside of our normal wheelhouse of stuff that we pursue. But anyway, I was looking at Cloud IAM. I contacted the Drupal infrastructure people and asked them, what's the deal? Like literally, like Cloud IAM and other vendors usually charge per user. And for Drupal, which has tens of thousands of users, it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars annually at their normal pricing structure. And so I just asked, I was like, hey, how did you guys get this? Like, what's the deal? And they said that it is pro bono. The deal is that they have to include the logo here on the sign-on page. And then they also put a thank you on the page, I think, or thank you on Drupal.org, listed them in the services directory, and then offered them promotional space at DrupalCon. And then they get to use Cloud IAM for free. So I was like, oh, well, that's great. I mean, we don't have as big a platform as Drupal does, but that also means we're not quite as much of a burden. So it's possible if we wanted to reach out to Cloud IAM that we could potentially get an account from them. But oops, thought that was it. Thought I am.
I want to jump in with some unexpected support for this SSO module. Because what
Hmm.
strikes me about it is it solves an important subset of these problems in a much simpler way than what you pointed out to. And the fact that the technique that you proposed seems complicated and involved to you. And you're hardly anywhere close to the naive user. It seems like the backdrop community could benefit from a fewer moving parts solution that solves some subset of these things. One thing that strikes me with a lot of things is that misnaming, like SSO immediately makes us think of OAuth and a million other solved things that are also called that. But if it was maybe renamed something like share users or something like that really reflected its local nature, it seems, I mean, if it works, it seems pretty valuable and simple, which substantially increases its value. I mean, like simple things that solve problems are good.
Yeah.
Probably
No,
also worth pointing
yeah.
out that there is simple SAML PHP, which I think Laren has been involved in. I hope I'm not wrong on that. And RG Piano has recently done some things to enable Backdrop to be an identity provider. Laren's got it to work. I've tried on Lando, but haven't managed to. But that could be down to Lando. But just to throw that other one into the mix.
I'm just going to give that as an example of what I mean by things get misnamed, because I've worked with simple SAML PHP, and the fact that Martin and Laren have trouble with it makes me believe that it is inappropriately named simple.
Yeah. Well, SAML I think is difficult, and so yeah, it's simple for the use case. Yeah. So
Simple for the guy that wrote it.
this module that was floated out there. Yeah, RG Piano ported this, and it achieves the single sign-on through using SAML identity providers, which is the same thing that you would be using if you're using Keycloak. But yeah, using simple SAML PHP, which is a library that implements the standard, and then this module basically like connects Backdrop to simple SAML PHP. Yeah, so. But if you did this, you would simple SAML is another application essentially, and so you would need to maintain simple SAML, but at least it would be in PHP, which we're familiar with, and not Java, which we're not familiar with. Yeah, I yeah, I don't want to dismiss your comment, Luke. You're totally right that there's absolutely a place for simple solutions, and on top of that, Backdrop's properties do fit inside of these situations. Like it's all in one domain, they're all on the same server. So we actually do have the opportunity to use this SSO module, to use Bakery. Like these solutions are available to us. I guess I just want to, yeah, in this particular scenario, I feel like even though the solutions are complicated, like there are like solved issues, and I'm just going with the industry standard on single sign-on is where I'd like to be, because I don't want to do it again. Like once we pick one, I'd really like to stick with it.
Yeah, no.
I-
Look, you and us, and is a sophisticated users, but just my bells went off when I heard about, oh, here's a simple way to solve this important problem that could be useful to a large portion of our user base. So let's keep it alive, and you know, who wrote the module?
Alan Mells.
Maybe I'll suggest that you rename it something that isn't isn't such a large commitment, and they can more accurately find the target audience.
It's been a number of years, but at one point I ported a module called Hybrid Auth. Have you ever heard of that library?
No.
It's a social sign-on that I don't know how valuable it would be, but the concept would be like we could do the sign-on through GitHub or something like that. And that way we wouldn't have to do and it would connect your social sign-on with your current account. So we wouldn't have to do this linking of different accounts from the event site, from the main site, you would attach your social account to your current account. I mean, it's probably similar to the other thing, but I'm just thinking out loud. I haven't looked at that module in a long time to see whether that library is currently still updated and stuff. But
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think GitHub can do SAML as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we've conceptually talked about that as an option because GitHub is the obvious provider for us. But I think we shied away from it, especially since we have sites like the forum and the event site where users probably or will not have GitHub accounts, like some of our attendees to our events. We definitely don't want to lock those people out. And so, I mean, obviously they could sign up to GitHub, but signing up to GitHub to attend Backdrop Live would be a really circuitous route. It's like Tim unmuted potentially to say something on that topic.
I think if we did it that way with GitHub, it could be still an optional thing, so people wouldn't have to use the single sign-on or the social sign-on or whatever.
Yeah, and by the way, we absolutely should be able to link our backdropcms.org accounts with GitHub because there's so many benefits that we could get from that. Assigning permissions and roles, letting you edit your project pages. Like there's a lot of stuff that we could benefit from if we connected those two systems. Not in the way that backdropcms.org would ever do anything with your GitHub account. It would only use it as a way of authorizing and connecting and granting additional permissions on backdropcms.org. Like, oh, you're a maintainer on this project, so you should also be able to edit your project page, that sort of thing. All right. Well, before we go, I also wanted to do a demo of a feature that so funny thing with Backdrop Live. Backdrop Live was a huge success. Tim, do you want to say anything about Backdrop Live?
Yeah, no, just to think it, as Nate just said, went really well. And I won't say much more other than we're going to talk about it. We're going to do a review, best of Backdrop Live during the user group meeting right after this. So
okay, great.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, the anecdote that I was going to bring up here was that during Backdrop Live, we had about 35 people at one point in the afternoon session for my afternoon, and I was presenting on upcoming features in 1.30, but I was up against moving Backdrop from Drupal 7 to Backdrop, and the entire conference attended the other session except for one person. And I was like, oh, well, in unconference style, like vote with your feet, right? And everybody voted that they wanted to talk about moving off of Drupal 7, highly topical thing at the moment. And so I told the one other person, "Hey, let's just close the room and go over to the other session." To which he said, with relief, "Oh, good, I wanted to see that session anyway." But that does mean that I didn't get to do my Backdrop 1.30 like walkthrough and demo and everything like that. And the one I really want to talk about is this backup and migrate capability. So I'm going to share my screen and just go through that, like what the state of it is. So here's the issue. So basic backup and restore functionality 2409. And there's a number of videos and things in here. I updated this just last night, so hopefully it's still working. But you can watch this video and get a pretty good idea of where it's at. But this is the latest. So what this fundamentally does is at this juncture, it takes backup and migrate's ability to export and import the database and puts it into core. So it creates an API for dumping the database and an API for importing the database. That's its underlying capability there, is taking the most crucial parts out of backup and migrate. Now it doesn't put in the user interface anywhere the ability to create or import a database, which is what backup and migrate does. And I think it's what Tim's a little bit disappointed in, and but it's like this is the first step. What this uses that ability for is to improve the way that backups are created when you're doing system updates. So after you update a new module, you have to run update.php. That modifies your database, and there's a non-zero chance that it will corrupt your database in an irretrievable way. And so we used to have this big set of disclaimers when you land on update.php, like make your backups and stuff like that. This removes the disclaimers because now backup is like a dedicated step. So before running updates, you should create a backup. There's an option to skip it if you want to, but just continuing through the backup. Now this is a small site here, so it didn't take hardly any time at all, but that has now made a backup of the site, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. So here in my file browser, so this directory backups can be specified via settings.php where it should be. It should not be in the web root. This is just for like an example right now that I've put it into the web root. And it makes a new backup. Let's see, today is the 21st. That's this one. It makes a new backup that should look pretty familiar here. It's got a database dump, and it has a config export. And so it's combined, it's exported both the config and the database into two separate files. And that has a JSON file that just describes the contents of the backup. So this file goes to this target. It does have the ability to back up multiple databases. So if you had to Civi CRM or some other software also on your site, it could also back that up. I think it does provide a little checkbox making it optional if you want to export that other database, because it's pretty rare that update.php would modify different database, but the option is there. So that's making a backup, but then if something were to have gone wrong, oh, and by the way, this for now, update.php always goes to the backup step before it checks if there are actual updates. This is just, I'm leaving this in here for testing for now because it's a convenient way to make the backup, but probably if there were no updates available, when you click continue here, it would just like skip to be like, there's no updates available, and probably would not walk you through the backup step.
If I can interject at just a moment, I think there's a really old issue saying if there are no updates, we should just skip a whole bunch of these steps.
Yeah, and you should probably jump all the way to the end to the review log, because I'm gonna go ahead and go through this again. So it stops you on like review updates right now. I added this backup step, but yeah, it previously would go from overview to review updates and then like stop you here. Yeah, there's a lot that we could potentially do. As part of cleaning up the update.php landing page, RG Piano pointed out several months ago, we added the ability to detect if you're coming from Drupal 7. And already I'm checking that now because Indigo Zella pointed out that we should probably hide the backup step if you're coming from Drupal 7. So I did that where the backup step is hidden. But that means that on this landing page here, we know right now already if you're coming from Drupal 7, because the backup tab gets hidden or shown based on whether or not you're coming from it. And the help text on this page should be tailored to, hey, you're upgrading from Drupal 7. Like, like this should say, upgrade from Drupal 7 and then like link off to the documentation specifically for moving from Drupal 7 instead of just pretending like, oh, this is a normal minor update. Like there should be special treatment for you're about to do a major upgrade. So we have that opportunity ahead of us too. So yeah, let's look at a restore. So this introduces a new top level PHP file. So just like update.php and install.php, it offers restore.php. And restore.php reads through your directory of backups, shows you all of the backups that are available. And yeah, just clicking restore. There's no progress bar on this page because that requires batch API, so it has to be able to do it all in one request because using batch API depends on a database that is working, like has to update the batch table and the sessions table and stuff like that. So the restore has to be done all in one big request, which means there's a pretty good chance that on a big site, this isn't going to work. Same as backup and migrate. Like there's limitations around how much you can do all in one web request. Like it can try to increase the PHP memory limit, to 256 or 512 megabytes and increase the timeout, but eventually you run into just like, it takes more than 10 minutes to import the database, and that's just too much for the system to handle. But it's still a really good solution for, yeah, this is definitely 80% plus, I think, of Backdrop users could benefit from the ability to easily restore their site. This also sets us up really nicely for continuing to improve automatic updates. That now that we have this integrated step for backups, it makes automatic updates, in-place updates, a lot more safe. That the automatic update can also make an automatic backup. So it'll be a really key thing to making people feel confident about enabling automatic updates on their site. And of course, you should. Oh, go ahead.
Huge win for small sites. I'm sorry if I'm jumping in at a wrong spot, but I'm curious what guardrails are for running out of space for backups or in the database or anything like that. Because the small sites with small things also might have, small allocations of resources like that.
Yeah, no guardrails as of yet. It doesn't back up the files directory, it only backs up the database and config. If it backed up the files directory, I think that would be a real concern. But
Oh.
the database, like making one backup probably isn't a problem, but making 100 probably might be. And so what I'm expecting to do is add another settings.php value or somewhere that like limits the number of backups. So when you make a backup, it would only maintain 5. I was thinking by default. So when you make a backup, it deletes the oldest one. So it would only maintain 5 backups at a time, which would regulate the use of space pretty strictly.
If it runs out of space, does it fail gracefully?
Unknown. I think it probably does. But if it runs out of space, like you probably also have another issue that if your site's only run like the database on a smallish site is rarely the compressed version of it is rarely more than 100 megabytes. And so if you're looking at that threshold, uploading 20 images is going to run you out of space. I don't know. I'm not trying to be totally dismissive, but I think that you're right. There's a concern here, but yeah, let's try to make it so that it fails in a nice way. And I think that would be the starting point for worrying about guardrails. It's really hard for Backdrop to know how much space it has available because that isn't necessarily defined by disk space usage, and the backups location might be somewhere else. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges around figuring out how much space you've got available.
And presumably there's not system independent implementation of like disk free and things like that, right?
And it can be regulated by stuff other than disk size, like a shared
Right.
host to just like can implement a limit some other way. Izzy's got his hand up for a while. So Izzy, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say on that point that it might have trouble handling a large database. I assumed that you were thinking of some elegant solution, even if it was just a message to suggest that well, you'd have to be able to tell how big it is, but that using B commands might be the solution at that point.
Yeah, it does have a message when it fails. I'm gonna have to take a look at it a little bit more clearly, but that's one of the reasons why the backups right now, at least, that config archive and that SQL dump they're like kind of standards. Like that config archive you can import with B, and that database dump you can import with DDEV or with B. And that's why I kept them as separate things, because they can be imported with universal tools. And making it so that they're like, it's the backup that you expect makes it pretty easy for somebody to restore the backup with a different tool. Also interesting that when creating the backup, you know that the site is working when the backup is made. And so you can depend on Batch API while you're making the backup. So you can make a big backup. You might not just be able to restore a big backup. And so again, it's kind of a big win where it's like having the backup is the really important thing. And then restoring it, there's lots of different ways and tools to actually get it back into your site. But restore.php will be like the easy way for a small site. And then bigger ones, if they need to do restore, then they've got other options potentially. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. There's a lot more to do. There's more. It doesn't have any test coverage. It actually broke all of the tests because update.php has changed. But yeah, it's coming together pretty nicely. I am really pretty optimistic again that we're taking something that works from Contrib, Backup and Migrate. It's been moderately reworked to be like under like new core practices. Backup and Migrate is a very old, it's been around for a very long time, which gives us a lot of confidence in its stability and its general approach, but also like the syntax and stuff like that, and just naming and all of that needs to be updated, which this pull request has done. So yeah, I'm very excited about this potential. I don't think Backup and Migrate itself will probably change a whole lot. It's possible that Backup and Migrate could use the in-core system now, but I think it's also just as likely that Backup and Migrate would just continue to do its own thing. Other modules like Tim's excited about, is it recipe module that you want to have an inline backup? Yeah, I think that a module that doesn't provide a backup, or a small module like demo module, would be really likely to use this new API. And it's also possible that there would be some kind of equivalent of Backup and Migrate that might spring into existence in Contrib, like, simple backup or something like that, where it doesn't have any of its own backup code. It only uses what's available in core, which is a more limited situation. Backup and Migrate allows you to choose like, your compression method, and allows you to backup and restore from different locations. This is really focused on I'm making a backup for emergency purposes, and I need to get the restore back out of it for emergency purposes. But with demo or recipe module, that restore could be made more accessible, and not strictly for emergency purposes, but just for like reverting purposes. But still, it's all within the same site, not moving stuff between sites.
Nate, I haven't really looked at it, and so maybe I should be reserving my thoughts. But I understood that with this approach, what you've done is you've taken all of the config files and put them into one backup rather than like a backup of them as separate files. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, the config export is the same as the config export that you'd use right now if you go to the configuration synchronization page. There's an export, and it exports an archive of all of the configuration files. But yeah, so it's just the total state of all your configuration. Yeah, so like this archive here, if I extract this, then it's your config active directory with all your JSON files in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the other thing I wanted to say is, for people like me who are sometimes just in the background, I've actually been astounded by the amount of effort that you've been putting out in the last little while. I just want to thank you very much for your contributions. You've been doing a lot lately.
Thanks. Yeah. I will be the first to say that usually I'm not the most active contributor in our community. We have people that are way more active than I am. And I wish I could always be the most active contributor, but there's just a lot of, availability and things like that happen. So, yeah, I have had more time as of late, which has been great, but that probably won't continue. And I want to say that like that's fine. Like that's the way communities and that's the way open source works. Like I expect that from all of our contributors that they might have some really bright points and then they might have other obligations and that's great. Like we had more than one contributor burn out on us because we took too much. Like, it's always like, yes, encouragement, yes, 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 more, more, more. And then all of a sudden, that person is burnt and then they're gone. And that's the worst thing. Like we just really don't want that to happen. So if people are feeling like, oh my gosh, like my life is falling apart and Backdrop is my refuge, um, yeah, watch out. Like that can be really dangerous.
Okay, then I'll just say thank you quietly.
I'm sorry, I wasn't meaning to be like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. But yeah, thank you, Izzy. That's very kind of you. Um, okay, looks like we got a bunch of people coming in, and that's because the next meeting is scheduled to start. So let's wrap up for today. Any parting thoughts before we end the broadcast? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week, and stay tuned for the user group meeting that is coming up right after this. So thanks, everybody.
Is it on
Hi.
the same Zoom?